Now, Executive Suites with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, always glad to have you with us. Later on the show, we're going to hear about a pretty new Cranston jewelry company, part of this general renaissance we're seeing in a way in the jewelry industry in Rhode Island, one of the state's best known industries. Luca and Danni, we're going to talk about the very interesting story behind their company and what they're doing. But first, right now, I'm very pleased to be joined by Mr. President, the president of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors, Bruce Lane. Bruce, thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
So first off, got to ask, how many realtors are there in Rhode Island?
There are, in the residential, a little over 4,000 right now.
4,000, that's a good number. Yeah. So it must be a pretty competitive industry for you guys.
It's a pretty competitive industry, yes.
You said, but you love everybody as the president,
I love
right?
everybody.
And how long's your term?
1 year term.
1 year term. Are you starting it or coming to the end?
I am coming to, I'm a little past the halfway point, November.
Is it a lot of work being the head of the association?
It is a time-consuming commitment.
Yeah.
That's why they have it for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Now we realize why. But you get groomed. You're the vice president, president-elect, secretary, treasurer for 4 years before. So we had an inkling of
you knew what you were getting into. And of course, your day job, you have a real estate agency. What's your agency, and where are you active? Where do you work?
I work with Prudential Gammons Realty. Our main office is in East Greenwich. I have my own office in Cranston. So our hub is Greater Providence, Cranston area.
Gotcha. So, all right, the number one question we always have when someone in a position like yours comes on is the basic one. How is the real estate market doing in Rhode Island? We're about halfway through 2015. You've been through a lot with the recession. How's it looking right now for this year?
This is a good time to be interviewing on how the market's doing, because the market's doing very well. The numbers on all sectors, single family, multifamily, condos have all gone up, spiked. And more importantly, the short sales and the foreclosure inventory is reducing. And that's what we really wanted to see, because they were skewing the market, because I'm sure that in everybody's neighborhood they had a foreclosure or a short sale. And when those properties sell at a lower value, they do have an adverse effect on your property. So with those disappearing, it's bringing us more back to a traditional market. And June numbers, our quarterly reports were, they jumped way up. Now, we also had a very bad winter. Mm-hmm. We get it. So there was a little bit of overflow coming from that. But nonetheless, all sectors went up. So it was
striking in June. You folks put out a release, the most active month in Rhode Island single-family home sales in 16 years, since the dot-com boom days, the go-go 1999 or so, right? Did you kind of feel that was coming, or were you surprised?
Well, practitioners saw it was coming, because obviously our numbers were going up. We saw a lot of activity. We got to remember one thing is our interest rates. Interest rates are hovering right around the 4% mark. You go back to the boom, we didn't have 4% interest rates. We had 6.5% interest rates, 6.25%. And they were still good. Those were attractive rates. Nobody ever said that was a high rate. When I started in 1984, 85. You want to see high rates?
Yeah, I was born, actually.
Right. Great. So we saw interest rates. We would borrow, at 10.5%, and that was competitive.
I think my father always tells me he bought his first house with my mom at 18, 19% rate, maybe, in the early 80s.
Early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that was a little bit before me. But so here we have this 4% interest rate. It had actually gone as low as 3.5%, 3.25%. This is on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So that has a lot of bearing on our market. And people are taking advantage of it. They were hesitant to jump in because everyone's like, we don't know where we are. Well, we pretty much, because of these numbers, we've balanced off. It's a good market for sellers. It's a good market for buyers.
Now, are you concerned at all about the Federal Reserve? They're talking about raising interest rates again. How much concern is there in real estate about that?
I don't know if I would say I'm concerned. I'm expecting that something is going to have to give, because those rates were put out there to help stimulate the market. The market is stimulated, okay? We're here. Do we have a ways to go? Yes. So could I see those rates starting to inch up a little bit? Sure. Will we be okay? Yes. Because we were doing okay, as I just said, when they were 6%, 6.5%. So even if they went up a half a point in the next upcoming year, I still think that we're going to see relatively good market moving forward.
And you mentioned, that was interesting about the short sales and the foreclosures. I remember around 2010, that was such a big concern. Also, people talked about shadow inventory, the ones that weren't for sale but were out there.
Right.
Do you think Rhode Island has worked through most of that?
They've worked a lot of the kinks out. I mean, it was something that we had never experienced before. So the banks were getting backlogged on taking in the properties and getting them prepped. There was a lot of title issues that had to be dealt with, and they did. So I think that when you see the streamline effect of short sales now, it moves a little bit quicker. But more importantly is, as the market keeps going up, people's equity positions are increasing. They're getting out of negative, maybe just to break even, but enough that they're saying, hey, wait a minute. If I wait another year or two, right. So people who were considering a short sale 2 years ago, they're not considering it now. They're staying put if they own a decent interest rate.
How about when you look across the state? Obviously, you're looking at numbers from everywhere. You're talking to realtors all over Rhode Island.
Yes.
Are you seeing any geographic trends? Are some parts of the state really doing better than others?
It's neighborhood to neighborhood. It's neighborhood. It's street to street at times. I mean, somebody decides to sell a house. They're more motivated than the next guy or gal, and they let it go cheaper. So does that mean that neighborhood went down? No, that means an individual let their property go at a lesser value because they had a plan that was a little bit more aggressive than that of somebody else. You see, waterfront properties. Waterfront properties, they've always done better because it's a different market for people. Now, there's issues going on with waterfront properties and properties in the South County area that we're paying attention to. We have not yet seen the effect, but you've got some laws that have changed that we're watching that sector of the market.
And I think the insurance issues for these waterfront homes is a big one.
Flood insurance, and it's not flood insurance for the waterfront communities and any area that's in a flood zone. So we have clients. I have a house in Cranston that has flood insurance. I'm 10 miles from a beach. But the zone is such that when they changed the maps, we got thrown into it. We're now paying $3,600 a year on a house that's worth less than $170,000.
Wow, that takes a hit. All right, we're going to take a break. We come back, we're going to talk more with Bruce Lane about the state of the housing market in Rhode Island. He's president of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. Thanks for being with us. Later on in the show, we're going to hear about another company that's joining the renaissance of new jewelry makers in Rhode Island, Luca and Danni, and their owner, Fred. He's going to be here with us. But right now, we're talking with Bruce Lane. He's the president of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. I keep wanting to call you Bruce Wayne. Do you ever get that?
Yeah, I get that quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a lot. I'm not original. I can't claim to be. So we were talking about the good news you're seeing in the market right now before the break, Bruce. How about across different types of homes? Is it mostly single-family homes? What are you seeing on condos? What's the look across that?
Oh, well, the condo market was lagging behind a couple months ago, and we were a little concerned, but it corrected itself, and inventory sold, days on market reduced, and the median price point went up on that. All sectors, multifamilies. And you look at the multifamilies, what's happening is they were doing very well because they got hit hard during the bust. So you had a lot of investors buying them. Now interest rates are low. First-time home buyers are taking advantage of living in a multifamily. So they can live in a 3-family house for relatively short dollars every month. So the investors have a little bit of competition now because the traditional buyer who can borrow money to buy it, so that market shot up both because there's 2 different buyers out there for it. So now, all in all, it's gone pretty well.
Pretty happy story you tell today. Yeah. How about home prices? People always looking at the value of their house, wondering what's going to happen. What are you seeing? We had a big run up in prices in Rhode Island, late 90s into the 2000s, and a fall. What are you seeing now? Well,
we're seeing them rise steady. We saw them lag quite a bit. But people are picking back up equity positions. We were back to where prices were in 2004, which was a really good market. So no, prices are inching up at a steady pace, so it's good.
And let me ask you about some things happening at the State House, which has a dribble-down effect to you guys, the Realtors. Realtors, you were not happy with a provision in the state budget, but it did won the day. It got passed a new 8% tax on short-term rental properties, vacation homes, things like that. I know there was concern about the impact, so it's been in place about a month and a half. What are you hearing about that so far?
The short-term rental tax, anybody who rents a property for less than 30 days is going to pay an 8% tax, 7% sales tax, 1% hotel tax. Do you see how I got that memorized in my mind? We repeated it quite a bit at the State House. It's also, there's a 13% tax out there too that gets, if you rent a room in your house, you pay an additional 5%. We have not yet seen an impact because most people who rent their properties, they already had, it was done. You've already secured your tenant for the summer. So what they did do for us is it didn't come into effect. If you were signed up and committed prior to July 1st with the implementation of the new budget, you didn't have to file for the sales tax. So I think a lot of the people who did it this season didn't see an effect. It's going to be next year that we're going to be looking at.
What do you think is going to be the impact next year then?
The impact is going to be when people go for vacation, they're going to look at Rhode Island, they're going to look at Massachusetts, they're going to look at Connecticut if they're going to be doing a drive. Massachusetts and Connecticut don't have the tax.
Really?
They don't have the tax. Okay, so now if I have a budget, which most people do when they go on vacation, and they say, well, Massachusetts is 8% less. I've got $3,000 to spend. It's $240 that I can be spending on food and dining and what have you that I can't in Rhode Island. Let's go over to Massachusetts. Let's go to the Cape. Let's do something there. That's where I think we may see some impact in a negative sense. That's why we were all over it. It wasn't about, we understand that we needed to bridge the gap in our budget. That wasn't for us to say you can't do. What we were trying to say was to please leave the housing market alone, because we were moving in the right direction as our numbers indicate, but we were still fragile. And anything that came into play that could hurt us, yeah, we were all over it. We lost that battle. Let's see what happens next year. Maybe it will go away.
I have another question for I'm a millennial, and there have been umpteen articles about people in my generation not buying their first house. People being concerned about whether it's student debt, job security, everything else. I'm curious what you're seeing at this. We're a number of years past the end of the official end of the recession at this point. I mean, are you seeing a change in the behavior of millennials? Are they getting more likely to buy houses? That's important to you, obviously, the new household formation.
There's a concern out there. I have 4 children. I have all sorts of millennials at home or not at home. They are homeowners, but I think that was pushed on our behalf. But one of the biggest concerns you just mentioned is student debt. There's got to be something coming that's going to help with the student debt, because I see some students getting out of college with $100,000 and $150,000 in loans, and if you do the amortization and what they're paying, they're not going to get out of that debt for 20 years. 20 years, and some of these numbers are $700 and $800 per month. Will that have an effect on the housing market? I would think that it would. So I think something has to be done there to help either consolidate debt, lower debt, just like they did for the housing market. They came up with the HARP program, where you had a 6% mortgage. They brought you down to a 2% mortgage. They let you have the 2% for 5 years, then they brought you up to gradually to a 4.5% and then capped you. That gave you 5 years to get your finances in order to help you. I'm not going to start talking about student loan, but it's that's.
But it's clearly it has an impact.
It has an
you
impact.
See it.
It has an impact. Yes.
So finally, I have one last question before we go to a break. I'm curious. You are a realtor, but I'm sure you have friends and family looking at houses. They come to you. They say, "What should I do?" Yeah. What's your advice? What do you give? What do you give to the people in your life when they're thinking about buying a home?
My advice to anybody right now, and I practice what I preach, is you're not just buying a house in today's market. You are buying a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage of 4% that nobody can take away from you. One that I probably will not be able to get again, you may not see again. So when you buy a house, it's attached to this 30-year 4% mortgage. When interest rates, let's look fast forward and say, okay, they're 5% or 6% or greater. There's an investment vehicle within that mortgage that you bought. Now, fast forward 5 years, it's time to move on to your next house. Keep that house. Keep that house. Rent that house. Rent that house, because if the rental market is paying what we call a cap rate of 7% and you're paying 4%, you're getting 3% return on that investment. And if you only put 20% down, that's 3% times 5. It's a 15% return on your money. You're not getting that in the market. And then if real estate goes up, so it actually creates an investment vehicle. So I say, if you're hesitant on buying, please don't be, because even if you have to, as long as you're qualified for that mortgage, my advice is, yeah, jump in now, whether it's an investment property, your first property, a second home, something to do, because that's what you're buying right now.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how someone becomes successful in a sales business. Thank you, Bruce Lane, president of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. Appreciate you being with me. Don't go away, though, because coming up next, we're going to talk to the owner of Luca Danni, a new jewelry company that's doing well down in Cranston. So stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, and we are talking about the business of jewelry. My girlfriend likes how much I learn about jewelry doing the show in Rhode Island, as you can imagine. And we're talking with Fred Magnanimi. He is the owner of Luca Danni. You might have heard of them as Luca and Stella. There's been a name change. We're going to talk about that. Fred, thanks for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, Fred, you are not, your family is not new to the jewelry business. People might have heard of Mag Jewelry. That's your family company, right?
Yeah. So we've been a manufacturer of jewelry, all kinds of jewelry, but the focus has always been religious jewelry. For the better part of 6 decades. We've got a full service and we've got a proper factory in Cranston. So we do everything from casting, model making, plating, all the production inputs that you'd need to be able to produce jewelry.
And that was founded by, I think, was it your grandfather?
My grandfather, yeah, which I'm actually named after. So he founded it in the 50s. He unfortunately passed away a couple months before I was born. So my dad at 26 had to take over the business, and through innovation and really pushing the envelope in terms of trying to grow the business, he created what I think arguably at one point was the largest manufacturer of religious jewelry in all of the world. And
not easy to do, especially in the last couple of decades, as there was so much competition.
Yeah, I think particularly the globalization and being able to communicate with Asia. There's other parts of the world, but Asia is where, particularly China, is where a lot of the jewelry is made now. And that's made it very difficult for a lot of business owners. I mean, I say it's kind of an unfair advantage for them with the labor costs that they have overseas to be able to run a factory in the United States, to be able to compete on a price level with what they're doing overseas. So the good thing is we are seeing there's a renaissance, so to speak, of jewelry that's made in the United States. A lot of that's driven by consumers who are saying we want quality US made product. And that's allowed companies like ours to be able to reinvent ourselves, so to speak.
And now you're here today because of a new company grew out of Mag and your family business, Luca Danni. And it's if we're honest, the roots are in a family tragedy. But tell the story. It's a fascinating story. It's a heartbreaking but heartwarming story in both ways.
Yeah, sure. So my background is not in jewelry. I graduated from Hendricken in 1997, went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and then came back and decided what I wanted to do with my life. And my passion was always finance. So I embarked on a career that took me into investment banking. So it's funny, I kind of swore off the exact same thing that I'm doing now. I really, when I graduated college, I had no interest until my brother got diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. So my younger brother, 18 months apart in age. And in late 2012, he was diagnosed with AML. Fought an incredible battle for a year. At the time I was living up in New York, so I got to visit him up in Boston. And it just became apparent that this family business was important to him on a number of levels. Ultimately, he lost that battle with cancer. He passed away on April 7th, 2013.
33, he was
33, yeah.
He was 33 years old.
You know, for me, I had 33 great years with him. So what kind of upsets me the most is I've got 2 young kids. I've got a 5.5-year-old son, a 2.5-year-old daughter, and they'll never have the opportunity to have him as a part of his life. So kind of spending time with him and understanding the business, I wish I asked more questions at the time. You know, my mindset is I'm not going into this business, I'm staying in investment banking. What a lot of people don't realize is the day my brother passed away, my dad got very sick. So he ended up in ICU, and literally the next day almost lost his life. And I remember just thinking, like, it doesn't end this way. So I did sort of the only plausible thing. I went back to New York. I quit my job. I relocated my family to Rhode Island, and I started working with him. And I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I just kind of felt as though my brother had this vision of somehow reinventing the family business. Like a lot of jewelry manufacturing companies at the time, we had a very viable business that, because of the competition from overseas, had really taken a turn for the worse. My dad spent 3 months in the hospital. Great man, was kind of my hero growing up. And I said, it sort of doesn't end this way. And I remember telling him when I joined, it was very emotional for us because you go into the factory, my brother spent 9 years there, you see things from his, you got his notebook, you got his cost sheets, you got projects he was working on. It almost would have been easier for me to put it in a box and move on with my life. So it was very difficult for me and my dad to have to come to terms with being able to see all aspects of things that he was working on. But my mandate to my dad was, you and him started something. I don't really know what I'm doing here, but you and I are going to finish it. And then when we're done with that, we'll kind of figure out what we want to do for the rest of our lives. But I just felt as though there was an opportunity. You get these moments in your life where you're like, I can do something that's so much greater than me. And I felt compelled to do that. I think there were points along that path where I really looked at myself and I thought I was absolutely crazy for what I'm doing.
I can imagine, yeah.
But it's been a really enjoyable experience.
And I want to make sure we get time to talk about the company too. So Luca, so you wound up, to fast forward, you create this company, Luca and Danni, and you started it last year in August, and it's done quite well so far, right?
Yeah. So we started. One of the things I wanted was a brand, and I wanted to leverage all of the infrastructure and the assets that we had in terms of being able to make stuff in our factory. But I felt as though I wanted to put my own spin. And the genesis of the bracelets that you see here, which is kind of our core product, comes from a wristwatch. And so I wanted to create something where whatever charm or beads or whatever the signature piece on the bracelet stood prominently on the top of your wrist. And it was, in my mind, it was an innovation that I didn't see out in the marketplace. And so it took a while to develop the product, but we developed it, and I felt very strongly that this is a product that we should really bring out to market. I felt like I was here for a specific reason. And I said, what a better way to kind of honor my brother and what he wanted than to have him be a very visible part of the whole process. So we started last August, so we're a little over a year old. We're carried in 700 of what I would think are the best independent boutiques across the U.S. and Canada. And it's been an absolutely incredible experience. I'm very
more than you expected?
Much more so. I'm very, very grateful, and I have a lot of gratitude for an incredible team behind me that's helped put us in a position to be able to do something that has a lot of meaning.
And how about the question of doing it in Rhode Island? You make the jewelry in America. I mean, the Rhode Island jewelry making industry is not dead, contrary to what people think, right?
I don't think so. I think it's changing. I think the people who are successful are embracing the innovation that's needed in order to change with the times. I think, and I'm very steadfast about it, I think the fact that we're based in Rhode Island gives me a strong competitive advantage versus anyone else. I can go from a raw concept to a fully produced product in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. If I'm not based in Rhode Island, I don't have that advantage. So for us, what's interesting for us is we've got a factory where we're manufacturing, for at least part of what we do, we're manufacturing our own brand. And I think being based in Rhode Island gives us a real strong competitive advantage versus being in other parts.
So what's next? Only about 30, 40 seconds left. What's next? What are you excited about for the company?
So we just launched necklaces yesterday on our website. They're in all of our retailers. Yeah, so you've got good timing. And we've got what I think is just an incredible product pipeline. So I think the best stuff for us is clearly in front of us.
And how many people you have working at the factory at this point?
When I started, which was August of 2013, we had 16. We now have 35. We've got a lot of people that we need to hire, so I think relatively speaking, we're in a good
Your father
position.
must be pretty excited about it.
He is, yeah. He says like the old days a little bit, which is good.
I love it. All right, Fred Magnanimi, thank you so much for being here. The jewelry is Luca and Danni. You can find it online. Any stores people might know quickly?
Sweet Twist, Flaunt, Bead Sting. There's a store list.
All sorts of places. Store list on there. He doesn't want to play favorites, understandably. Thanks, Fred, for being here. If you missed any of this show or any other episode of Executive Suite, you can catch all of those on our website, WPRI.com, or on iTunes as a podcast. See you next week on Executive Suite.